Hello, my name's Euan Crumley, and welcome to the latest episode of the Athletics Weekly podcast. In each show, we bring you everything you need to know from the world of run, jump, and throw, analysing the biggest stories and speaking to key names from the sport. Incredibly, we're already halfway through the year, and at the time of recording, we've just sent the June issue of AW magazine to the printers. In its pages, you'll be able to read exclusive interviews with the likes of Norwegian 400-metre hurdler Karsten Warholm, inform American sprinter Kenny Bednarek, and British distance runner Jake Smith. However, the bulk of the issue is devoted to an event that's still a few weeks away, but is already proving to be a big talking point in the athletics world. Towards the end of June, Faith Kipyegon will take to the track at the Stade Charletti in Paris and is going to attempt to become the first woman ever to break the 4-minute mile. Given that her world record for the distance currently stands at 4:07.64, it's going to be the tallest of orders. She needs to find pretty much 8 seconds, on an average of 2 seconds per lap, from somewhere to break it. Yet she's backed by the same sponsors, Nike, who helped Eliud Kipchoge to break 2 hours for the marathon in 2019, albeit illegally, but once again, no stone will be left unturned in the pursuit of shaving off fractions of seconds. Technology will be at the forefront of Faith's attempt too, plus there will be pacemakers to help shield her from the elements. There's so much to talk about, and to do that, I'm joined by AW's Head of Digital, Jason Henderson. Hi, Jason.
Hi, Euan.
Okay, let's get to it. What we know so far about this planned sub 4-minute mile attempt, it's due to happen on June the 26th, but there's a window of June the 26th to the 28th, depending on the weather, and so much is a closely guarded secret at the moment, but we know there will be super shoes, or super spikes in this case, and we know there will be pacemakers. How excited does it get you, Jason?
Well, very interesting. Very, very interesting. I don't think I'm alone when I say that breaking 4 minutes is going to be a very, very, very tall order. I'm not sure anyone really believes that it's going to happen later this month, apart from maybe Faith Kipyegon and a handful of Nike people. It's a really tall order. I was a lot more optimistic about the sub 2 hour marathon with Eliud Kipchoge. I mean, Kipyegon's a magnificent middle distance runner, but she's got a lot to find. So I think the whole thing will be really interesting. It's generating lots of chat about the sport. We're talking about it now. Loads of other people will be talking about it in the coming days and weeks all over the world. And, it's a good thing generally. But yeah, she's really got a work cut out. As you say, Euan, 2 seconds a lap. That's a lot to find.
Well, it's a good point you make about the 2 hour, with a 2 hour marathon, although that's an incredibly difficult thing to do. There was so much more, not necessarily margin for error, but there were so many other dynamics at play, so many other areas to enhance or to work on, whereas it's a track, it's in a stadium, it's a far shorter distance. It feels like the margin for error is just so much smaller on this one.
Yeah, and we're not quite sure at the moment what kind of tricks and stunts Nike are going to pull. I heard somebody talking the other day about the possibility of having a vehicle in front of Faith Kipyegon on the track, like a big car or van that would literally have a big shield behind it that would completely, block out any kind of wind that she would be able to draft behind. That's just conjecture. Whether something like that will happen, I don't know. I joked with somebody the other day that they could have people behind her, male runners or people on motorbikes or push bikes that might have some sort of machines that blow wind that would literally give her a gust of wind behind her the whole way around the 4 laps. And I think if that happens, she could probably break 4 minutes because, we've all gone out for a run on a really windy day where you've got a big gust of wind behind you and it makes an enormous difference. But again, that's just conjecture. That's just some mad theory that I came up with in the space of 30 seconds thinking about it. So, the team from Nike have obviously been working on this for a while. They're a lot more imaginative and creative than someone like myself. So, yeah, it'll be, one of the things that make it really interesting is just what exactly they'll have on the day. What will we see? When Kipchoge did the sub 2 hour marathon, we had super shoes and loads of pacemakers coming in and out of the time trial who were in a kind of a V formation. And then there were articles written on how that kind of formation is the best one when it comes to drafting. You went around little roundabouts and they'd tinkered with the roundabout to create a kind of camber on the road. So the a little bit like the bend on an indoor running track, so that when he was going around these roundabouts, he would have a little bit of an angle or a bend to run on, just to make things a little bit quicker, a little bit easier. So we saw lots of things then. I'm not sure what we'll see later on this month in Paris, but yeah, it's going to be really interesting to watch it unfold.
Well, and what we know from the outset is if they employ any of these kind of devices, then it's not going to be a world record. It's not going to. It's going to be an illegal time. It's not going to meet the World Athletics, standards or requirements, which means it splits things into two camps. You have on one side you have perhaps, let's say, call them the purists, who don't really see the point in trying to do it if it's not under normal conditions, and then there's the other side, which is, let's see what is possible. Let's see how you do this. It's an interesting process in itself, and I suspect both yourself and myself fall into the second category. I'm absolutely fascinated to see what they do.
Yeah, I mean, I think Faith could break 4 minutes if they either had a gale force wind behind her the whole way, which you could manufacture, or if you had it on the road on a downhill course. I mean, that would see a sub 4 minute mile as well. I remember back in the 80s, there was a downhill mile on the roads in New Zealand, and I think the winner there broke 3.5 minutes for a men's mile. So it shows you the difference of a downhill, what a downhill road can make to an attempt like this. But as you said at the start of our chat here, Euan, this is on a track, and there's only a certain number of variables and things that you can control on a track. Surely you can't suddenly make part of it downhill or anything like that. So yeah, it will be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah, and it won't obviously just be Faith having to run quickly. If there's a group of pacemakers in front of her, especially if they're in a V formation, as we suspect they will be, that will mean somebody running in one of the outside lanes, at least one person running in one of the outside lanes, which obviously then makes the distance greater, provided they're all going with her. It's harder to imagine the pacemakers swapping in and out in a mile situation as well. Is perhaps a harder thing to do at that short a distance. So if someone, say for example, is running in lane 2 or 3, they're having to keep pace but going a further distance. It's all of these things are adding to the intrigue.
Yeah, definitely. I think when Kipchoge went for the 2 hour marathon barrier, I think the pacers had practiced, dipping in and out of the time trial to get it down to a fine art. And I hadn't really thought of this much, but as you say, it would be much harder on a track in a mile attempt, where the runners are going at a quicker pace as well, 60 seconds per lap. It's not hanging around. So yeah, that's going to be difficult, and unless maybe the male pacemakers would all be so good. I mean, presumably fellow Nike athletes, and they would be so good that they would find a 4 minute mile pace not that hard, so they might be able to just stay with her the whole way and not really swap around too much as they did in Vienna for Kipchoge's sub 2 hour marathon.
Yeah, so take us back to to Vienna 2019. You went to cover it for Athletics Weekly back as it was all happening. What are the sort of the standout memories for you from that, and how the event kind of felt, and what unfolded in front of you?
I mean, for starters, I remember getting into lots of arguments with people in the run up to the event, with some pretty well known former international runners being absolutely adamant that it was impossible. Literally impossible. Or it wouldn't happen for years and years and years. They were really very adamant. I mean, the arguments got quite heated at times. I always felt it was possible, but it just depended on what you did, how you kind of tweaked things, and things like shoe technology and all that kind of stuff. I mean, I still don't think we're anywhere close to the actual limits of what people can do. So I felt it was possible, but obviously, still extraordinarily difficult, and it took an exceptional athlete in the form of Eliud Kipchoge, who was in the form of his life, to be able to break that barrier. And I mean, I nearly didn't go for a while. I think maybe about 2 or 3 months before the event, I was thinking about it because it was in the autumn, and I thought this is going to be really interesting. It kind of wasn't on our schedule of events to cover because it was a bit of a one-off. So we have all our events coverage, as we know, Euan, is based on traditional events that happen year in, year out. But this was very much a one-off, so it didn't sort of naturally make its way into our schedule. But I just had a quick look at some cheap flights, and the flights were quite cheap. So I took a bit of a punt, went out there, and it's probably the best sort of £60-70 with a Ryanair flight that I've ever spent. It was really worth doing. A few of the good journalists were out there as well. Guys like Cathal Dennehy, I remember, were out there, and lots of the people that we know from being involved in the London Marathon were there as well. They had some of their team involved because the whole thing was organised by Ineos, of course. And I think we realised into the closing miles that it looked like it was going to be done. It looked really easy, and then when he crossed the line and he'd broken the 2-hour barrier, the very large crowds that had assembled by that stage just went crazy. It was really a terrific event. I mean, right up there with one of the best events I've ever been to for Athletics Weekly, with regards just how interesting it was and the atmosphere and everything. Just really, really good. So if the Faith Kipyegon events can get anywhere close to that, then it'll have done pretty well. Although I have to say, I haven't been looking for cheap flights out to Paris yet for that event. I might end up watching this one on a live stream with most other people.
But you hit on an interesting point there with the marathon as well, in that it was very openly manufactured. But by the time Eliud Kipchoge was coming down that finishing straight, as you say, the pictures, I remember watching it all unfolding, and it was a big crowd, and they were all going nuts, and it didn't feel very manufactured by the end of it. Plus, I think he said in previous interviews, this is a guy who's won, a number of Olympic championships or Olympic titles, every world marathon major you can think of, pretty much, and it's the sub 2 hour attempt that he probably puts at the top of his list of achievements.
Yeah, I mean, it was manufactured, but I don't think it was manufactured too much, so that's why people were still impressed. So, say for example, if they'd held the marathon down the side of a mountain and they'd just dropped a huge amount of elevation, and he might have just smashed 2 hours. I'm not sure people would have been too impressed. They would have said, well, of course, he's just been charging down a mountain. But because this was a totally flat course, and the major tweaks were just things like shoes and pacemakers, it made it impressive. I mean, he covered the marathon distance with a bit of help inside 2 hours. And that's why it made headlines all around the world. And Faith's got her work cut out to do a similar feat later on this month, although I think her challenge is even tougher.
Yeah, and as I say, it's the basis of our upcoming magazine issue, the June issue of AW, and as part of that, you went down to the University of Exeter to visit a team there who are heavily involved in the project. And what were you talking to them about, and what were they telling you?
Yeah, well, my feature with the Exeter University physiologists is just one feature in this big Faith Kipyegon Breaking 4 section, which we've got in the next magazine, which you and we were busy proofreading it and tidying all the pages up earlier on this week, just before our talk today. The Exeter University piece was basically there's a guy there called Andy Jones, Professor Andy Jones, who people will probably best know him for having worked with Paula Radcliffe over the years. He's helped popularise beetroot juice as a very effective supplement, and he was also involved in Nike sub 2 hour marathon attempts in the past, most notably the Monza one in Monza where Eliud Kipchoge finished just outside the 2 hour barrier. And I met him and a PhD student called Rebecca Osborne, who's actually the current Northern Ireland 1500 metre champion. But she's doing studies into female middle distance running. And these two people have basically been helping out Nike with the whole Breaking 4 project. They're really excited about it, as you can imagine, really intrigued to see how Faith can get on. But it was interesting to me that even they admit it's going to be a really tall order. They've written an academic paper about the whole thing, and they pretty much say in the paper that no woman on the planet at the moment has demonstrated sufficient physiological ability, with things like VO2 max, etc., to actually break 4 minutes. There's nobody out there, including Faith Kipyegon, who's actually shown the ability to do it. But they think that with a few tweaks and a few tricks and stuff that we'll see in Paris, they think that Faith could start getting further towards 4 minutes, and we can at least see that gap at the moment, which is almost 8 seconds, start to fall down a little bit. And for me, one of the most interesting things was that Andy Jones, the lead physiologist at the university, he has a mile best of 4:05 because he was a bit of a teenage prodigy when he was a younger runner. He's 55 now, but when he was a teenager, he was a really good runner. 4:05, and I asked him that if he could go back in time and try and run a mile again, what would he do differently? And he said straight away, training, just train better, train smarter. That was the first thing he said. He didn't mention shoes or pacemaking or apparel or anything like that. It was just training, just doing a bit more training, a bit more targeted training, a bit more speed work, just training smarter. That was his main thing, which I thought was interesting because his PB is 2 seconds quicker than Faith's. So he's obviously experienced what it's like to run at those kind of speeds.
Yeah, it's interesting that he makes that point, because you can put as many bells and whistles as you like on someone, but if they're not good in the first place, there's not really much point. And I guess
exactly.
I guess in terms of middle distance women's running, Faith Kipyegon is arguably the greatest there's ever been. 3-time Olympic 1500 meter champion, 3-time 1500 meter world champion, and a 5000 meter world champion. She holds the 1500 meter world record as well. She's by far and away the best option at the moment for this test. Yeah,
no, definitely. And the Exeter University guys went to see Faith at the Nike headquarters, and they did physiological tests on her, which they were a bit coy about, as you can imagine. My interview, that they didn't want to give away all the secrets and everything, so there was a lot that they couldn't talk about. But they, it's safe to assume that they were very impressed with her as an athlete and a person. They thought she was a really great character. Andy Jones described her as a bit of an extrovert compared to Eliud Kipchoge. He said that she was a really bubbly character, and they think it's going to be a really exciting next few days and weeks in the run up to the event, and fingers crossed she can get at least a little bit closer to that 4 minute barrier.
Yeah, it's important to remember as well that it maybe does get lost a little bit, and you mentioned it earlier there, that Eliud Kipchoge didn't break 2 hours first time round. There was not quite a dress rehearsal, but the first attempt in 2017 at Monza, I think he was 25 seconds over. But it took a first go and then some refinement to take him to the next step. So I guess if, as you're saying, if she does make serious progress towards that target, if she doesn't break it, then that's enough encouragement to keep going, I guess.
Yeah, sure. I think it's probably only natural for people to have a few attempts and to be quite close before they eventually do it. I mean, with Kipchoge breaking 2 hours in Vienna, I think the Monza attempt, where, as you say, he was 25 seconds outside, has almost been a little bit forgotten. But that was still a magnificent effort. I mean, to come within 25 seconds at the time of the 2 hour barrier was really quite impressive. And I remember a lot of people were shocked by that, about how close he came. People didn't think he would actually get that close. So yeah, we might not see a sub 4 from Faith Kipyegon in Paris, but if she can start nudging a little bit towards it, then I think that would be great. And a little bit like Roger Bannister in 1954, I think when it is eventually done, probably the floodgates will open and the mental barriers will start to disappear, and we might well see quite a few other women breaking 4 minutes after Faith does it. But whoever is first is going to be remembered forever, that's for sure.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Ask you is how significant this is for women's athletics. I mean, you mentioned earlier on about with the pacemakers that it's relatively easy for male pacemakers to be running at a 4 minute mile pace, which itself sort of highlights the progress that's been made since Roger Bannister, broke the 4 minute mile. And I guess if Faith's already, when she broke the mile world record 2 years ago, she took 5 seconds off it. Now to get close to 4 minutes is to take another 8 seconds off is quite an ask. But in terms of role models, or someone who's great for the sort of profile of the sport, it's significant that when she does well, the other athletes celebrate with her. We've seen it firsthand. There are athletes who just point blank don't like each other or are less than popular, shall we say. Faith doesn't seem to fall into that category.
No, and that's great to see. I think Sifan Hassan, who held the world record before Faith Kipyegon, she's similar. I think all of her fellow athletes and rivals, they all seem to like her, and it's good because we operate in a sport that has lots of doping allegations and lots of history of doping, as in fact lots of other sports do as well, like cycling and gym and weightlifting, and even things, dare I say, like football. There's lots of doping in lots of sports, and there has been in ours. So when you see athletes like Faith Kipyegon and Sifan Hassan who get treated in such a friendly manner by their rivals, then you kind of think that it's almost like a stamp of approval, isn't it? That their fellow athletes obviously think that they're clean and good athletes, as opposed to ones that might potentially be cheating.
Yeah, it was telling. There was in this issue of the magazine, as part of the feature, there's our colleague Jasmine Collett has done an interview with Jessica Hull, who's the Olympic silver medalist behind Faith Kipyegon in Paris last year, and it was one of the races where Faith broke the world 1500 meter record in Paris, in Florence, a couple of years ago, and Jess Hull was about 8 seconds behind her, but still broke the Australian record. And the first thing that Faith Kipyegon did was congratulate her rather than the other way around. She was thinking of the other athletes rather than herself, and I think that's sort of instructive of what she's like, and the sort of example that she seems to be setting for everyone.
Yeah, and I think when we see the attempt in Paris, I think pretty much everyone will be wanting Faith Kipyegon to do well and to try and get as close to 4 minutes as possible. She's one of those very likable athletes, isn't she? I think everyone will be wishing her well and hoping that she has a really good run.
Yeah, and as part of the discussions in the run up to this, I was talking to our AW columnist and Olympic bronze medalist Catherine Merry, and we were talking about the kind of things that Faith may or may not be wearing in terms of the apparel that she'll have on, not just the shoes. And it took our minds back to the Sydney 2000 final that Catherine was part of, and Kathy Freeman's famous Swift suit. For those who don't remember, it was a head-to-toe sort of lycra, performance suit. It was almost like wearing a full-body swimsuit on the track. It never really caught on, shall we say? But it was one of the first sort of crossover moments that I can remember. It's one that definitely sort of lodges in my mind, where technology outside of the footwear was really placed sort of front and center.
Yeah, I mean, this is 25 years ago now, so it's quite a long time ago, and it has stuck in people's memories. And I guess every time an anniversary comes up of that Sydney Olympic women's 400 meter race, you see articles and interviews with Kathy wearing that iconic outfit. I think there were a few others at the time as well. I mean, it wasn't just Kathy Freeman who was wearing that slightly, dare I say, odd-looking outfit. There were a number of other athletes, and maybe there was a bit of a thing at the time where the shoe and kit companies like Nike were bringing out these kind of outfits and having publicity events to try and promote them and making a big deal out of them. I remember Denise Lewis getting involved in one where she had a suit which had fabric down one arm, which was her throwing arm. So she would wear it for the javelin. And yet the other arm, the non-throwing arm, didn't have anything on it. So it had fabric down completely down one arm, but not down the other, which looked quite unusual. And of course, being a heptathlete, she would have a different outfit virtually for every event. Certainly different bits of footwear as well. So that was another example. So yeah, we await the latest chapter in Paris this month to see what Faith Kipyegon might be wearing during her breaking four attempt. I'd be very surprised if she walks onto the track just wearing, what we've come to regard as quite standard, apparel, just shorts and a singlet or something. I think she'll possibly have something slightly more unusual than that. But yeah, let's wait and see.
Yeah, it was funny that Catherine Merry was saying when Kathy Freeman hadn't worn the Swift suit at all at any point during the games, but then turned up wearing it in the final, and she did say the rest of the finalists all took had to do a double take. It did turn out upon a little bit of research for Catherine's column is that. That Kathy actually turned up at the Gateshead Grand Prix maybe a few weeks before, wearing what must have been a prototype of it, but nobody remembers that. It was, I think she ran a 200 meters in the pouring rain, but nobody remembers that one.
Yeah, no, I was possibly there, but I don't remember it either. I do remember from that summer just before the Sydney Olympics, Kathy did an interview day or an interview morning in London, and I went along to it, and it was absolutely packed. Every journalist around wanted to try and get a couple of minutes with her, and I struggled to get any kind of one-to-one or interview at all. But when she was leaving the building, I managed to butt in and mentioned that I was from Athletics Weekly, and her face lit up. She said, "Oh yeah, Athletics Weekly." She said she was very familiar with the magazine. She'd been reading it for years, and I was quite taken aback by that, because obviously, spending most of her time in Australia, I wouldn't have thought she would be a typical AW reader, but yeah, she was apparently. She was quite a keen reader of the magazine, which probably formed the intro to my feature at the time.
Yeah, it will be fascinating to see what comes up at the end of the month. It was interesting as well, there's, the significance of her potentially being the first woman to do this. And I write about this in the next issue of the magazine as well, is that at the Great Manchester Run recently, there was I was going to say a reunion, but it wasn't a reunion. It was the first ever meeting of Britain's three Olympic 800 metre champions, Anne Packer, Kelly Holmes and Keely Hodgkinson. And just seeing them together, I found that hugely significant. But our colleague, Paul Freary, spoke to Anne. And it's worth remembering that when she won 800 metre gold in Tokyo in 1964, that was the furthest distance that available for the female athletes. It still seems incredible that just as recently as that, those were the limited options available. There were just 12 events for them to compete at as well. It just seems bonkers to think back about that.
Yeah, that is a bit crazy. I think it was like her kind of secondary event as well. She was mainly known as being a 400 metre runner or a sprinter generally. And she came into the games as a ridiculous 800 metre novice. I think when she won in the final, I can't remember exactly the statistic, but it was something like it was only the fifth or sixth 800 metre race she'd ever run. And that included the rounds in the games, the heats and stuff. So yeah, she was a real novice. Cinder track. And as we saw so often during that period as well, athletes would often do really well and then they just promptly retire straight afterwards. They wouldn't carry on into their 30s like Faith Kipyegon. So yeah, it was a different era. But yeah, I think she still ran 2:01. And if you think that 40 years later, Kelly Holmes got down to 1:56 when she won her Olympic 800 meter title in Athens. Yeah, I mean, to me, that's not a massive improvement. It just goes to show how good Anne Packer was running on a cinder track as well in an event which was at the time fairly alien to her. So yeah, that was a great get together, wasn't it, Euan, with the female 800 meter champions, and it made for a superb photo.
It was a brilliant photo, and from the footage, it was clear that it meant a lot to the three of them to be together. I guess it's a very, very exclusive club to be a part of. Only they know how it feels to be part of it. But to see those three generations together, it did feel almost like an illustration of just how far things have sort of moved along. It was like seeing history in front of you. It was fantastic.
Yeah. On a slightly sad note, unfortunately, if or when Faith Kipyegon breaks 4 minutes for a mile, we won't be able to get Diane Leather in a photo op because she sadly died about 6 or 7 years ago. The first woman to break 5 minutes for the mile back in 1954. And I do remember her saying in an interview in relatively recent years, it was probably about 10 years ago, that she felt that a woman breaking 4 minutes for a mile was something that wouldn't happen for a long, long time. She was quite dismissive against the whole idea. And who knows? She might be right. We'll see how Faith gets on.
Well, I was going to say you've teed up the final question of this episode perfectly. Can it be done?
Well, I think it can be done. I don't think it can be done this month. I would like to think that Faith can come closer than I think she's run 4:07:64. So if she can chip a bit of time off that and get nearer to 4 minutes, then I think the whole event will be deemed a success. But yeah, I'm not sure when it'll be done. I think one thing that the Exeter University team suggested was that I think the women have to get the 800 metre record down a bit more first because they're just not that fast at 800 metres. If you want to run sub 4 minutes for a mile, you've got to build in what Professor Andy Jones described as a bit of a buffer. You've got to have that speed to be able to go through the first 2 or 3 laps and just have a bit in hand. And we're not quite there at the moment. But if athletes like Keely Hodgkinson and Athing Mo and Mary Morar and others can bring that 800 metre time down, then I think the sub 4 minute mile will start to look a lot more possible.
Well, it's a good note to leave it on, and thank you very much indeed, Jason, for joining me.
We've not heard your prediction, Euan.
My prediction is very similar to yours. This is going to sound like a complete cop-out, but it's very similar to yours. I don't think she's going to do it this month. I would love to be proved wrong. I would absolutely love to be proved wrong. I think there's just so little margin for error, but I'm fascinated to see how they go about doing it and how close she can come. I think that's the key part, is how much she can take off the world record. It does seem bonkers to be saying the world record might not be enough, but I think if there's a sizable enough chunk to be taken off, then it's going to have been deemed a success, as you say. I don't think she can do it this month, but I think it feels like it's coming. It feels like there's a progression coming, and I think depending on how far she can knock the door down will determine how quickly it can come. But it's all good in my eyes that there will be so much interest, that we are talking about it. People will be talking about the sport. It's I know it's going to be manufactured, but I think it could be potentially a very powerful thing.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Jason, for joining me, and we will be back next month for more from the Athletics Weekly podcast. In the meantime, you can keep up to date with all the latest news as we approach Breaking 4 at athleticsweekly.com. If you want to get the best digital experience, then why not head to our new look website to check out our subscription offers. Take advantage of our early bird offer to get the best coverage of the number one Olympic sport and access exclusive premium content. Don't forget too that the June issue of AW is out now, available via athleticsweekly.com or selected retailers. And finally, please also like and subscribe to the AW podcast on your usual podcast platform. See you next time.